This is about defending democracy. This is no longer Democrats versus Republicans. What do you want your kids to believe in? There must be give and take.
This is White Flag with Joe Walsh.
Hey, Joe Walsh, former Congressman Joe Walsh. It's White Flag with Joe Walsh. Hope you've had a good week. Every week I sit down with people who don't think like me. This is White Flag with Joe Walsh. I am so excited to speak with the gentleman I'm about to speak with. I've been involved in politics for a little bit now. I don't know how much longer I'll be involved in politics. I consider Mike Madrid to be the smartest or one of the smartest minds. Oh, you shush. One of the most attuned, smart, perceptive political thinkers and strategists in this country. I have always been a big fan of Mike Madrid, and I am so over the moon because Mike has a book coming out, a new book coming out, his latest book coming out on the 18th of June next week. It's called The Latino Century: How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. Such a timely read, such a damn important read. And I welcome my friend. By the way, you can follow Mike Madrid on Twitter X at Madrid_Mike, at Madrid_Mike. Mike Madrid, thank you, my friend, for taking a few minutes and joining me.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for being just such a champion, Joe. It's been a great friendship we've had, and it's great being in the foxhole with you. When you look back at these battles, it's the people next to you that you can count on, and you've always been that guy, always since we first started talking a few years back. And thank you for what you're doing for the country.
Thank you for what you're doing for the country and everything you said there, Michael, right back at you. The Latino Century: How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. This book comes out in a week. When did you begin? And let me even back up even further. I wanted to ask you when you began writing the book. When did you first conceive of this idea?
It's a great question, and there's kind of two answers. Let me give you both of them. The first is the early drafts of this really go back to my undergraduate work at Georgetown University in 1992, 1993. As I was a young man looking at the demographic change that the country was going to go through over the course of my career and lifetime, I realized that at some point in my early 50s, America was going to become basically a non-white country for the first time in her history. And I wanted to kind of watch and track that trajectory. And so I decided to get into politics because I also wanted to be a practitioner and test some of my theories and see if I could kind of play a small role in guiding where that was going to go.
Yeah.
But in terms of actually sitting down and writing the book itself, right after the 2020 campaign, when you and I got to know each other well,
Yeah.
it was very clear to me that while there's been a lot of focus, rightfully so, on some of the reforms needed to kind of fix the system and protect this fragile experiment called American democracy, that the shifting coalitions in this country and the demographic change was hitting its apex at precisely the right moment. And I wanted people to be aware of what that meant heading into the 2024 elections. So I knew I needed to get a book out before this November's elections. And here we are.
Well, and Mike Madrid, that's what's so freaking cool is, and this is why I am going to implore everybody to buy and read the book, The Latino Century by Mike Madrid, because your timing is impeccable. We are 5 months away from an election, a very important election. You're talking about, and correct me, the second largest ethnic voting group in America. We're talking about a group of people, Mike Madrid. Explain this. Let's start here. That neither freaking party really understands, and we've got an election staring at us. Play with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. That's really the premise of the book. And I say that as somebody who has been involved in campaigns at the highest levels on both sides and seen it from both sides. And I can say quantifiably, as an expert in this voting group, neither party is doing this right. And you can see it. Let me give you a real specific example. You've got Biden's campaign, this outreach campaign called Latinos con Biden, which is kind of a Spanish throwback to the 1980s and 90s approach to the way we've always done this. You've got Trump, who's got this Latino Americans for Trump, just made that pivot last week, changed the name of his outreach group to Add Americans,
Ah,
which is actually clever and prudent and wise because the fastest growing segment of the Latino vote are third and fourth generations that don't see themselves any different than typical Americans.
back
And
up, Michael. Repeat word for word what you just said there. That's really important.
yeah,
The
with the
fastest
Democrat,
growing, the
the
fastest
fastest,
growing.
yeah, this is central to understanding what's
Yeah.
happening, folks. The fastest growing segment of the Latino vote are third and now fourth, discernible
Okay.
fourth generation Latino voters, meaning the grandchildren and great grandchildren of immigrants.
Okay.
And so when you look at polling data like we saw in this last week, where 69% of Latinos support Biden's asylum shutdown, 70% of Americans do. It's virtually, you know, identical. Latino voters, in many ways, are taking on the economic and security concerns of Republican policy issues, which Biden adopted, by the way, prudently. And they're moving away from the race based identity politics that the Democratic Party is sort of imposing on them.
And is that, Michael, is that, again, we're talking about third and fourth generation, as the generations of Latinos in this country expand, you see that assimilation?
That's exactly right, and that's exactly the right term. It is unique and it is different than we've seen with other groups in the past, but there's a lot of similarities, and we can explore both of those. But what you just said is really central to the book and central to understanding the the enormous changes that are about to happen to both parties because the coalitions of both parties are changing. And that's again why I wanted this book out now is because it explains Biden's weaknesses. It explains why there may not be enough white college educated
Hmm.
Republican voters to continue shifting over to Biden in time to win in November. And it's why there needs to be an aggressive push for people who love democracy in this country, in this experiment, to figure this out in the next 5 or 6 months. Otherwise, we're in deep trouble.
And Michael, I'm all over the map, and I apologize if I sound just nuts right now, but I've got you for a limited time and I'd love to pick your brain. Go back a second. So Biden announces a crackdown on the border and his left flank goes berserk. But when
Correct.
he did that, you knew generally Latinos would support what he did.
I knew 100%. I wrote about it in the New York Times in January, telling them to do it because that's where they would be, and that was right. And look, I wrote a piece in the Atlantic. I'm not trying to puff my own chest here, but I'm trying to communicate to the administration the only way a homeless Republican can, which
Hmm.
is by telling the data-driven story that you need to get out there and change your position on this in order to stop the leakage of these Latino voters that are leaving you. Because if they keep going at this rate, you can't win Arizona, you can't win Nevada, you can't win Georgia. And until and unless that is stopped, there aren't enough Republican defectors to get there in order to win the way we won in 2020.
So when I was in Congress, Michael, a few years ago, I would always say, because I'm kind of a border hawk, that Latinos in this country, legally in this country, they're every bit as damn hawkish on the border as most Americans are. And a lot of Democrats on the left would push back on that. Now, was I brushing with too broad of a brush there? Or when it comes to the border, where is the average Latino in this country?
It's a great question, and let me answer it this way: there is there is an in between position where they are looking for strong border control, but also the pathway to citizenship and protection for a lot of undocumented, for example, spouses that are already here.
Yeah,
So it's kind of a combination of the two. I don't want to say it's one or the other, and that's why both parties have gotten this
yeah,
wrong, and it's
yeah,
why we haven't been able to do immigration reform in 30 years. Now, what's
yeah.
new and unique at this moment is Biden is doing something actually very, very significant. He's turned 180 degrees away from the orthodoxy of the Democratic Party, and he's emphasizing border security first. That's prudent. That's where
Okay.
Republicans have always been.
Yeah.
That's where the American public has always been. They want border security stopped first and foremost. It's like saving the patient and triage first, and then you fix the other ends of it. But Republicans have never shown a proclivity to actually do anything beyond that.
Exactly.
And so that's why Democrats have always been hesitant to put policy proposals on the table, because they're like, well, if we put specifics on the table, then the Republicans will take that and not do the other side, which is what we really want. And the
Um,
problem with that, as I write again in the Atlantic yesterday, the problem with that thinking is it's kind of like going out for burgers and fries. If you go get burgers and fries and they say, well, we've only got one, you'll still take whatever one they've got. You may want both, but they're still going to take, you can take whatever they got. And that was the fallacy of Democratic thinking. And it's why I argue Democrats lost the war on border security, but they can still win the war on immigration reform. And what
yeah.
Biden's going to do in the next couple of weeks, dollar to a donut, is he's going to, through executive action, start passing some of the other side of the immigration reform
Yeah.
packages to protect dreamers, to provide a pathway to the best that he can through executive action. And that's what's unique. That's what's different, is this trench warfare that we've been in as a country on immigration, fighting for inches with nothing happening but people losing their careers and dying. I think is gonna change, because as Republicans become more Latino,
Yeah.
and as Democrats are losing their Latino base, the whole calculation is readjusting very rapidly.
I want to drill there, but I'm going to do this constantly, Mike, because I I endorse a lot of shit that I believe in, but I really, really endorse stuff that I really believe in. And everybody listening to me, and the weird thing about this podcast, Mike, is because of my weird journey, we've got far right to far left and
Yeah.
everybody in between listening. Mike Madrid, that voice belongs to Mike Madrid, longtime political strategist and consultant. He's got a book coming out next week, June 18th, called The Latino Century: How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. It is a seminal read. It's an important read if you want to understand where this country is politically right now. This is so damn crucial. Buy this book, Barnes Noble, Amazon, anywhere. You know where to buy a book. Michael, okay, so start there. Why are Latinos leaving the Democratic Party? Go.
Okay. There's a couple of reasons. Let's walk through all of them, and I'll walk through them in priority. The first is again, it is historically factual that assimilating ethnic groups generationally starts to mirror the overall electorate. That's the first thing. That's happening. We have been stuck in a narrative for the past 30 years that the Latino is a Spanish speaking, recently migrated, naturalized, swore an oath to become a citizen and started voting. And the issues that they care about are the border, farm workers' issues, undocumented issues. There has been some truth to that, because the past 30 years, Latino new voters, over half of them were naturalized.
Ah,
Today, in 2022, 80% of new Latino registrants are native born,
wow.
English dominant or English exclusive. So the
Wow.
culture, the culture and the perspective is almost 180 degrees different from where it's been in the past couple decades. So
Is it,
the
is it,
yeah,
then is it fair to say that, and I know you'll drill down on this. Okay, it's not necessarily because what Democrats are doing that they're leaving. This is just a demographic
yeah,
eventuality.
you're so brilliant. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. The
shush,
way
go.
the way I say it is this in the book: Republicans are winning Latino voters despite their best efforts,
I love
not
it.
because of them.
Okay, okay.
And so, yes, as you know, I'm very data driven.
Hmm.
I'm a huge believer in that there are demographic and scientific explanations for voting behavior. And this is one of these perfect examples at this moment. Let me give you another really specific example, Joe. If you take Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott, Doug Ducey, the former Republican of Arizona, even this guy named Brian Dolly, who ran against Gavin Newsom, the
Yeah,
Republican sacrificial lamb,
yeah.
all heavily Latino states, they all have one thing in common. They all met or significantly overperformed where Donald Trump was with Hispanic voters.
Mm.
And if you look at all of the battleground seats in Congress, the House, the Republican candidates overperformed Donald Trump. And I say this for a very specific reason. A lot of people believe that Donald Trump is bringing Latinos to the Republican fold. Everything I just presented is very strong evidence that he's limiting a bigger shift that would otherwise be happening.
Oh,
Republicans would be doing considerably better with Latinos without Donald Trump pushing or limiting that movement towards
is
their party.
Michael, that's brilliant, and that's really cool to hear you say. Weird tangent. Is there something unique about Trump that might attract male Latinos to him?
Another great question. The answer is possibly, but I spend a whole chapter actually dissecting kind of these male concepts of machismo and the strong man, or the Latin American strong man, or what we call the caudillo in Spanish. The truth of the matter is, Latinos, especially by longer generational stays here, have the largest gender gap of any race or ethnicity in the country.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's directly correlate, by the way, to our education divide. Hispanic women are going to college at a much bigger, faster rate than Hispanic men are. And Hispanic men are making up the fastest growing segment of the blue collar workforce, while Hispanic women will increasingly represent management, C suites,
And that's
executive
a greater
director,
discrepancy, Mike, even among black men and women.
far more.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. And let me give you another really fascinating data point. We elect women at a greater rate than any other race or ethnic group. So in California's legislature, for example, there are more female Latinas elected to the legislature than men.
That's cool.
And it's almost at parity in red states like Texas and Florida. And in states like New Jersey, where it's not Mexican American, it's largely Puerto Rican or other or countries of origin, it's about 70% women. Even in Utah, red state Utah, the minority leaders of both the leaders of both minority, the Democrats, the heads of both houses in their legislature are head by Hispanic women.
Well,
So there's
that's interesting.
women are a big driving force in our politics at a much greater rate than any other race or ethnicity.
If so, if they're leaving, the Democrats are losing their share of the Latino vote. What's attracting them to the Republicans?
Great question again. Most of it is economic populism and protectionism. A lot of these working class men work in the energy patch. If you look at some of the Rio Grande Valley, of southern New Mexico, of the Central Valley in California, if you look at where some of the biggest rightward shifts are that we've been hearing about so much, a lot of them are along the border or in the energy space. But Latinos are also the largest part of the manufacturing base, the agricultural base. Get this, Joe. 1 in 5 Hispanic men, 1 in 5 work in the residential construction industry or a related field. That is a jaw-dropping number. So
Whoa.
when interest rates triple in the past 4 years and currency is devalued because of inflation by 20%, the home industry comes to a halt as it has. That's a gut punch to 20%,
Wow.
20% of Latino households. And
Wow.
it's not just the impact of the job working, but the housing affordability crisis affects younger people disproportionately. And the average Latino voter is 30 years or younger, right in that sweet spot for that first home buying age. So it's a double gut punch. And so when people say, are you better off now economically now or in the previous administration? For a wide swath of men specifically, but households generally, the answer is yeah, we were quantifiably better off.
And are they more protectionist? So, like Mr. Joe
Yeah.
Walsh, free trader, that doesn't really do it.
Well, and Mike Madrid's a huge free trader too. I mean, what I will say is this: conceptually, huge believers in free trade, particularly with Mexico. In practical terms, not if it's going to affect your job,
Hmm.
right? Like kind of like everybody else. So this cultural seamlessness that exists with Mexico is unique, and it's not just
Okay.
Mexico, but about 63% of Latinos in the country in America today are of Mexican American descent.
Okay.
So we call it the Latinization of America, but it's really the Mexicanization of America. Um, and again, just for some perspective, it's not that 63% is so big, it's that every other group is so small. The second biggest group is El Salvadorians with 9%,
Ah,
then Puerto Ricans with 8%, Cubans come in fourth at 6%. Cubans are only 6% of the Latino community in the country. And so it's not that the Mexicans are such a big part, it's that everybody else is such a small part. It's sort of Mexicans and then an amalgam of everybody else. So a little bit in the weeds, but that's important, I think, perspective.
is it just Michael quickly, like just in the state of Florida,
Yeah.
would those numbers change?
Dramatically. Florida's an
Okay.
outlier in every possible way.
Got
Mexicans
it.
are the fourth largest. Puerto Ricans are the um, larger, just past Cubans. I think I said El Salvadorians were the second largest. The second largest are Puerto Ricans, not El Salvadorians. Puerto Ricans, and of course, already United States citizens, of course. And so Puerto Ricans are the largest group. Cubans are the second largest group in Florida, and then I believe it's El Salvadorans or Nicaraguans, and then Mexicans in Florida.
My,
Complete outlier, Florida.
I thought I saw you tweet this last week. Maybe I didn't. I'm pretty sure I did. When Biden announces his crackdown, and I'm going to get this wrong. Uh, um, Texas Democrats and Texas Latino Democratic elected officials supported what Biden did, but California didn't.
Yeah,
California
yeah,
Dems didn't. Am I right on that? Or
yeah. Fascinating. It's really fascinating. And this is. I can't underscore. It may sound a little bit nerdy and wonky, and it's probably just more important to a guy like me who's been looking at this for 30 years. But
you're the sexiest policy wonk I know, Mike Madrid. Damn you, go.
the craziest divergence of responses from Latino Democrats came out in response to Biden's proposals.
Hmm.
And there's some crazy through lines here. So Alex Padilla, my good friend Alex,
Yeah.
senator from California, comes out with the strongest anti-Biden statement, calls it a Trump action. Ruben Gallego from Arizona, a very progressive member of the House who's now moderating considerably because of his Senate run in Arizona, stands in lockstep with Biden, says this is the necessary first step of where we need to go. And then you've got this amalgam of the Henry Cuellars of the world and
Yeah.
the Salud Carbajals from Santa Barbara, Central Coast of California, who are supporting Biden. And then there's a lot of people who are kind of more trepidatious about it. But the most shocking thing, Joe, was the silence amongst, I would say, 75% of Latino Democrats would be lighting their hair on fire if this was Trump who said this,
Yeah.
but know that Latino voters are with Biden, leaving this traditional issue from them and their constituencies in a new direction. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of really perplexed Latino Democratic politicians out there not sure of how to play this. And to me, that's
That,
very healthy because it means we're moving
yeah.
beyond racial identity politics towards true diversity of opinion. And that's how you break down these racial stereotypes.
Yes, and again, the takeaway for every Democrat or everybody listening to us right now who doesn't want Trump to win, Latino voters support what Biden did last week.
Overwhelmingly.
Overwhelmingly, says Mike Madrid, the author of the Latino Century, which comes out next week, June 18th. Buy that damn book. Um, Michael, quickly on this one, authoritarianism.
Yeah.
How does the whole notion of and again, I'm ignorant. Help me. Does the Latino voter, are they more open, or are they more open to an
Yeah.
authoritarian?
Is there a cultural
Strong
proclivity
man.
to this?
Where does that come from? What is that?
It comes from a bad stereotype, and again, let me explain the evidence. Why is a lot of authoritarianism that we've seen develop throughout Latin America. I mean, frankly, is because we supported a lot of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's be clear about that. One, but two, you have to understand the Latino culture is much more what we call communitarian. It's not
Ah,
individualistic. It's really views the worth and the value of the individual only in context of how everybody in your familiar cohort is doing. So that's important, and that leaves less of an authoritarian mindset. But more importantly, let's get just to that. That's just cultural
yeah,
gobbledygook.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Get into evidence. What we know is that the recently migrated vote for Democrats 70% plus. Again, it's the third and fourth generation that is moving more towards the right. So how, and these are people that don't affiliate with their Latino culture as much.
Yeah,
So why do we feel the need to impose this sort of stereotype? Is it like a recessive gene
yeah.
that goes dormant for two generations and then pops up, and suddenly you're like, oh, now you support a strong man and your right wing politics? The migrants that come here are amongst the most left leaning voters in the entire American electorate, 70+% for the Democrats. So just from voting results and data, no, there is no cultural proclivity at all. This starts further down the road, 60 years down the road. And like, does that make sense?
That makes total
Okay.
sense.
Yeah.
And as someone who my entire being is about individual freedom,
Yeah.
you're saying to me, again, like probably every immigrant or everyone who comes to America, eventually, uh, generation after generation, more and more embrace individual freedom.
There's no question about that. I mean, I would argue that the immigrant, the economic immigrant, as well as a lot of political emigres, they really embody. This is the beauty of the book. It's actually a quite optimistic book, which a lot of people that know me are like, how the hell did Mike Madrid write an optimistic book? You're such a data nerd and telling us the world's going to hell. But really, what this says, Joe, is that immigrants broadly, Latinos, more specifically, have much higher confidence in our institutions, much more trust in our social institutions broadly, whether it's media, academia, the government, the church, the military, corporations, businesses, at a time when trust and confidence in our institutions is collapsing.
Yeah,
And that collapse, we don't talk about this enough, as the real danger to democracy. If nobody believes in our social institutions anymore, it's not going to work.
yeah,
You've got to believe, like in the 1950s, when this doctor comes out with a polio vaccine, you trust the expert to take the shot to protect each other. That's what vaccines are. It's not to protect you, it's to protect the herd.
amen,
That
amen.
mentality is gone from Americans. It's basically over generations been bred out of us. The only thing that continues the mythology of America, the belief in the idea of America, the hope of who we are, is new blood from immigrants who come here with that mythology. That's what keeps it going. As
That
much as I believe firmly we need more migration for economic reasons and national security reasons, I believe more than anything that we culturally need this infusion of people who believe in us again. And that's what's happening. That's what the Latinization of America is it's a reinstallation of the belief in America as a shining city on a hill, as a beacon, because of our institutions, and is willing to work hard and even though we haven't had a full seat at the table, candidly, to say I still believe in it, I still trust it. There's something romantic and beautiful about that mythology that is being reinvigorated by this demographic change. And with that long speech, let me just say this one quick thing. The
yeah,
great irony of the moment and why I wanted to write the book now is because while all of these people rightfully are focused on campaign finance reform, electoral college reform, stopping our enemies from interfering with our elections, that's all right and good, but nothing can help us protect ourselves and become more of us than our own internal demographic cultural change. That's the ultimate solution to fixing America, and that's what's happening right now.
so preach, brother. And I've never heard
Sorry.
anybody say it the way you just said it.
That's what the book is about, and thank you
And
for
that's what
that.
the book, The Latino
Little, little,
Century, is about.
little
And
preachy.
that,
I apologize.
no, and I love it when you do that, data guy. And that is optimistic. But then the dark Irishman I am, Michael, I
Yeah,
look at that and I think, well, but the longer they stay here, eventually they're going to lose faith in our
yeah,
institutions like we all have.
yes. And,
But that's for down the road.
well, that's yeah, and look, that's why that's why the challenge of America is about the immigrant. When we say we're a nation of immigrants, that doesn't mean we're talking about the past. It means our nation only works if we're continually replenishing
Yeah.
our mythology with the immigrant. And we can't be afraid when those immigrants aren't white Europeans. because it's a
Yeah.
human belief.
Yeah.
You and I are the same conservative universality. We are
Yeah.
all endowed by our creator, right? When Reagan talked about the shining city on the hill, modern Republicans stop by saying, windswept and God blessed. The
Yeah.
next sentence is all about immigration. It says, if there must be a wall, it needs to have a great gate open to all who want to come here. That's the only way this shining city on the hill works. American exceptionalism only works when it's open and is bringing people in and continually replenishing the idea and the hope and the mythology of American greatness, because immigrants believe it more than anybody else does.
Michael, give some quick context. The
Yep.
numbers. The Latino Century is the name of your book. What percentage of this country right now, broadly speaking, is Latino? What's it going to look like in 20 years, 50 years? Just broad
Yeah,
strokes.
great question. There's about 63 million Latinos right now. It's about 20%, closing in on about 20% of the overall population. This is important because in about 8 years, America will be a non-white majority nation for the first time in her history.
In 8 years. In eight
eight
years.
eight years. Yeah, we'll be a part of this. We'll be talking about this more and more over the 8 years because it's going to become more pronounced and impact, and there'll be more greater backlash. Which is one of the things I never expected when I was a young man, but here it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not just Latinos. That's Latinos, African Americans, Asian Pacific Islanders. You add
Hmm.
up all non-whites,
Hmm.
you end up with a plurality nation.
Yeah.
And the book is about pluralism. My book is about pluralism. There won't be a clear white majority anymore. They will still whites for the rest of our lifetime will still be the largest group of people, and presumably will be for probably another 150 years. But it will not be a majority, and that we're getting closer to a true version of pluralism
Yeah.
that is going to test some of our founding creeds and beliefs. Is, can we do this? Can the American government do this if we're a non-white majority country? I
And
believe
then
we
this,
can, by the way.
yes, I kind of do. The second context, Michael Madrid, is are we talking about the fastest growing ethnic voting group in the country or the second fastest? Where are we at, right?
Yeah, Latinos surpassed Black voters in 2020 as the largest minority group.
Okay.
Um, Hispanics, this is important because this is going to get a little quirky too. Hispanics are technically racially white. This
Yeah.
may change at the next census. So when I say it's the largest ethnic group, is the way we phrase it, because whites are not a common ethnicity. And this is one of the fascinating things I'll put my brain around in the next few years too, is we're going to start hearing things, Joe, like whites are not monolithic.
Yeah.
And there's going to be as it shrinks as a share of the population, we're going to become much more attuned to the cultural diversity within whites. We've
Ah,
just blandly said everybody's white. Well, that's not fair. You're of Irish ancestry. That's a cultural perspective born of thousands of years of your ancestors forging an identity that doesn't just go away. By the
yeah.
way,
Yeah.
as a species, we know that culture matters as a survival skill, and it's passed on consciously or subconsciously for the generations. And so, you're not Italian. You're Irish. You're not German. You're not Ukrainian. You're not Russian. You're not Armenian. You're
Right.
Irish,
Right.
and that matters, and it's important. And that distinctiveness is not a threat to our common bonds. We're entering an age where it's actually going to fortify the American idea again. Which, incidentally, I don't want to get too nerdy, but I'm a nerd, so here we go.
Yeah.
This is not new to America. The new part was the melting pot theory that came
Yeah.
about during Teddy Roosevelt's progressive Republican era. The
Yeah.
idea was we were trying to nation build at home, and we tried to get people to stop with their hyphenating and become an American. And and there's some beauty to that, but there's also some danger because that's not the way human beings work. You can't
Yeah.
just create nation. They're forged over centuries,
Yeah.
and that's the beauty and the potential of America, is bringing all these people together. But you can't just ask people to leave their culture like it's some sort of baggage with the mother country. It's okay to celebrate that and not question people's commitment and belief in and trust and confidence in America. I believe that.
Again, That voice belongs to Mike Madrid. He's the author of The Latino Century: How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. The book is out on the 18th next week. Get your hands on it. It's such an important read. Um, Michael, simplistically,
Yeah.
the average Latino in America would say expand, baby, legal immigration, limit illegal, uh, and the Democratic and the Republican Party fuck up because they're only each good generally on one of those things. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. Is what's happened is the parties have developed and embodied as orthodoxy their own stereotype of what this is. That's why they're so uniquely bad about the moment. Is the Democrats believe, well, they're non-white majority, they're non-white voters, so we've got to help them, right, culturally, and we got to lift them out of their oppression.
Yeah,
And Latinos are going, that's not what I need. I mean, we came here for a job. Just give me a job and I'm
just give
good.
me a job.
Like, just allow me to provide an income, and I'll take care of the rest. Republicans in their best, the best of Republicans, there's also a worst of Republicans, but the
Yeah.
best of Republicans would say simply, just become more white. Just
Yes.
don't drop the ethnic bullshit and become white, and we'll be more accepting of you. And I heard that a lot in Republican conventions, and that's not a real thing for human beings. It's okay to celebrate our uniqueness while also being more committed to our American identity. Now, at worst, there's a huge nativist, which is a diplomatic way of saying a racist
Yeah.
strain in the Republican Party, which,
Yes.
well, at least for me, Joe, I don't know how your experience, but it was hidden more in the shadows of conventions. It was there. I'm never
Always.
going to say it wasn't there, but
Yeah.
it's in the shadows a little bit more. Now it's on stage. Now it's on the platform with a microphone, right? But back then it was just kind of this, weird peculiarity in the shadows of convention halls. And that the real problem for the Republican Party is the tension between those two pillars. Is if the
Mhm.
Republican Party is going to be a majority party, it's going to have to accept that a multi-ethnic America is a reality and embrace and engage it. And you're seeing Trump do that kind of in his own stilted way by drawing contrast with first the legal versus illegal, which it candidly on its face is a legitimate, credible, perfectly
Yeah.
reasonable, responsible argument.
Yeah.
There is nothing racist about talking about border security and legal immigration levels versus stopping illegal immigration. There's nothing racist about that. Now, once you start to approach it as a racist, and
Yeah.
it's like pornography, you know it when you see it, right? You can't
Yeah.
really explain it, but when you see it, you know what it is. That's the problem in the party today. And that's why Trump is limiting this otherwise larger shift that would be happening with Latinos to the party.
What, Mike? What? If Biden and his top 3 or 4 advisors grabbed you, flew you out to D.C. this weekend, sat you, locked you up in the White House for an afternoon, plopped this book down on a table, and said, "Damn it, Madrid. I want to win this November, but what does our party need to do to right this ship?" What would you advise them?
The first thing I'd say is we need to announce next Friday or Monday a Marshall Plan for housing. You need to build, and build. This is a pro growth, pro jobs, pro economy constituency that is affected by it both in the real and the abstract, both on the construction and in the consumption side. You want to get people feeling better about the economy, Marshall Plan immediately. And you
Cool.
don't talk about, let me put it this way in a way I think you'll really grasp. The Latino voter is this generation's Reagan Democrat.
Oh,
They're
wow.
registered as Reagan Democrats, but they're blue collar, culturally conservative, go to mass and church more than most on Sundays. They're not necessarily a socially conservative voter. They're simply a play by the rules voter. They're like, you know what? I'll show up. I may not get rich, but if I can afford a home and send my kids to college like I couldn't go to, maybe take a vacation, I'm good. I'll play by the rules. I'll live by this game. It's when you don't allow that, when the Democratic Party is viewed as the existential threat to people who don't have a college degree and the industries that allow them the opportunity to buy a home and send their kids to college. That's why there's a problem. People in those
Uh,
those spaces, and I was talking to another interviewer
Yeah.
the other day saying, yeah, well, Biden's done better on manufacturing. He's actually drilling more oil. It's all true. But you know this better than any human being I know. You go talk to people, blue collar people, and you talk to them every day. You go talk to somebody in the energy patch, they're not Biden voters
No,
for a
not
lot
at
of
all.
reasons. Okay.
Yeah.
That when Latinos are showing up with the lunch pail next to these people every day, consuming the same media, listening to the same music, talking about the same ball games, why are we surprised that they're voting more and more like them? Until we start talking to these voters that may not be in the diner in West Virginia the way the New York Times talks to them. They might be at the taqueria in Tucson or Las Vegas or, in El Paso, or increasingly in Memphis and Des Moines and, Raleigh. That's what the Democratic Party has to make the adjustments to. But in terms of an actual specific, it's housing, housing, and housing, because you need job starts. It needs to be immediate. You need sticks in the ground, and it helps on both the consumption and the employment construction side.
Mike, again, first time I heard that, and I want you to patent that. Latinos are this generation's Reagan Democrats. I love that. Um, uh, I- so it's a subset of the Democratic Party's larger problem, which is they're having trouble with working class Americans. They become a wealthy, elitist, college educated, suburban, I watch MSNBC kind of a party.
Yeah,
Fair?
brother, the largest demarcation in American politics is the education divide.
Yeah.
And the Latino men have the lowest college attainment rates of any group, in large part because you got to get out and work to support the family now. Go take that construction job and make 40, $50 an hour, because we need the money now. In part, that's why our women are going to college at a greater rate, is because there's the wages that they can command are not what the man can command immediately. So they're going to college at a greater rate, and it's also that college divide is larger between Hispanic men and any other group, and
That's
that's
fascinating.
why Latinos are becoming the fastest non-college educated voter group and behaving like Republicans.
Um, Not to get partisan, but if flip it, if Donald Trump's campaign reached out to you,
Yeah.
him and his top advisors flew you to Mar-a-Lago, sat you down, fed you something, and said, what does the Republican Party need to do to get these voters, to keep these voters? What advice would you give them?
First, I need a food taster, right?
Yeah.
But if we pass that test, let me say this, because there is a chapter that says what Republicans get right and what they get wrong, and there's a
Yeah.
chapter that says what Democrats right and what Democrats get wrong. The chapter on Republicans starts out very simply. My one sentence piece of advice, and it's going to sound goofy and we're going to laugh a little bit, but it'll sink in. Quit being racist,
Bingo.
because it's happening on the natural. Just stop it. Just quit being yourselves for just a bit and watch what happens. And that it sounds simple. It's harder for them to accept, because they have so inculcated their base that there's an invasion happening and these people are trying to take your wife and your money and your job,
Yeah.
that they don't realize that half of the people they're working with on the job site are Hispanic anyway and have been there for 60, 70 years. Like, just stop with that.
Yeah.
And if you focus, as you rightfully are, on blue collar jobs and a blue collar economy and a blue collar culture, that's where the Republican Party's already positioned itself. And demographically, most of their voters are over 65.
Yeah.
And they're not the healthiest folks, because they've been working in a lot of these industries. They've got
Yeah.
a shorter lifespan than
Yeah.
Democrats do. So they're in a demographic cul-de-sac. They're going to have to replenish the voter rolls really, really quickly. And if they don't, they're going to suffer from that.
Um, uh, you said, and I love that in the book, The Latino Century. Buy it. It comes out on June 18th next week. Don't be racist. And you said, don't be yourselves. Therein lies the problem, because you're right. The base of the party is now fully radicalized. That's an inherent problem. Michael, you just went somewhere, and I'm going to let you go because you. By the way, Mike Madrid needs a little bit of a nap this afternoon because he is on this book tour. The book comes out next week. He's all over the TV and in the prints promoting the Latino Century, how America's largest minority is transforming democracy. I would dare say I think it's the most important political book out this year.
Thank you.
Um, uh, I have posited Mike Madrid that my former party, the Republican Party, is a shrinking, dying national party because of what you just said. Their base is older, the base is going to die, and they're not replenishing. Did you agree that they're shrinking as a national party, or have you seen enough to think that the working class can prop them up for a while?
I believe it is shrinking demographically. But what I will say is the numbers that I am seeing now, and the reason why, you and I have been on some meetings together with some big brains talking about this November's elections. I am now seeing the math that would suggest that there are enough Hispanic voters shifting to the right to offset the
Wow.
Republicans that have been moving to the left. And
Okay.
remember, those are the two demographics, measurable demographics that are changing the coalitions of both parties. College educated whites are leaving the Republican Party and they're shifting over to the Democrats. US born non college educated Hispanics are moving to the right and they're bolstering the Republicans' ranks. That is changing our notions of race
Yeah.
and ethnicity. And the Democratic Party is only 40% of voters have a college degree. So the math was benefiting Democrats up until about 2020. Now what's happening is the Latino vote is growing so fast, and many of these younger third generation, 80% of them have much stronger Republican proclivities. It's offsetting the marginal returns that we're getting from Republicans moving away from Trump to Biden. And that's why the race is so close, by the way. That's the reason why it was like, how can this be happening? These, Democrats keep winning these close, tight races. Well, watch what's going to happen, Joe. Something else is going to happen that's very unique in American history, at least in our lifetimes. Republicans are going to start winning high turnout elections. Democrats are going to start winning low turnout elections. And this lower information voter is a blacker and browner voter. And you've been in some of these conversations
Yeah.
and heard them where some Republican strategists will say, well, as long as black and brown turnout is lower, we can win this race. You're going to start hearing Democrats
That's
say that now.
fascinating. That's fascinating, Michael.
Democrats are going to start saying if less Latinos show up, we got a better chance. And that's what I'm saying.
That is
Go ahead.
fascinating. And
Yeah,
no, that's fascinating. And in everything I've listened to you say and write in the last couple of years, and it's in your book, this is my biggest takeaway. You like have these two massive shifts
yeah,
passing each other in the night, like two
exactly.
ships in the night. College educated whites leaving the Republican Party, going to the Democratic Party, and non college educated non whites going to the Republican Party. Which I know you've said this. Which shift is happening faster?
There's the conundrum, right? Is in 2020, the shift to Biden was happening marginally faster. That's why we won the race by a
Ah,
handful of votes across a handful of states.
okay.
What I'm saying now is there are 4 million new Latino voters that have come onto the rolls in the last 4 years. Those are unaccounted for, and they don't have a vote history, but we know from the polling it's not as strong a Democratic vote as it should be. And that's why I was ringing the alarm bells to on those meetings that we were having, saying,
Yeah,
this is what I'm talking about. You just explained it better than I could. That's the problem. That's the conundrum, is we're not making more college educated whites fast enough as there are non-college educated Latinos.
boom, perfect.
That's
And
what
Michael, just quickly, is it the same in battleground states on how we
it
elect the
well,
president?
well,
Same.
great question. And the first is, you need to understand this: in every single battleground state, the Latino vote size is greater than what the margin of victory will be
Oh
in
wow,
every one of them. So for the
everyone.
first time in my 35 years of doing this, I'm going to say definitively it will be the Latino vote that determines the next president of the United States, for that
Wow.
reason, because we don't know that break. But especially in Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, most people don't think of Georgia as having a
No.
significant Latino population. They do. Incidentally, Wisconsin, there are more Latino votes than African American votes in
Oh
Wisconsin.
wow.
So yeah, it absolutely is going to be determinative, and it is happening in those swing states. That's why I'm starting to get a little nervous here, Joe.
Well, and again, I want everybody to understand that when Mike Madrid gets a little nervous, he's a data guy, and he wraps his arms or hands around this shit more than anybody I know. So when he's nervous, we should be nervous. Michael Madrid, I've got two final ones for you.
Yeah.
The book, The Latino Century: How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. The book is out next week. Go buy it, Mike Madrid. Michael, two quickies. Um, the whole issue of that guy named Trump is an existential threat to my fucking democracy that I love and worship and adore. This whole issue of we need to save and defend our democracy. How does that play slash resonate, if at all, with the Latino vote?
It does, and it's playing, I think, exactly the way it is with every other demographic constituency. That's the challenge. It's not uniquely sensitive to it. A lot of the questions I get is, well, how can Latinos support a guy that's this authoritarian that wants to deport you and separate families at the border and build a wall and a moat and shoot people along the way?
Yeah,
And not only is that a good question, but the way I respond to it is I say, well, you answer this to me first. How can white women losing all of their votes and rights vote more for him than against him? I mean, at least Latinos are the majority is still with Biden.
yeah,
White women facing most of these same issues are still voting for the guy. I mean, are they authoritarian? Or what is it there?
bingo.
And the answer really comes down to these different demographic markers, which we prioritize as human beings for our own identity reasons that allow us to rationalize our voting behavior one way or the other. I'm not trying to dodge the question. I'm just trying to say is there's no simple answer to it. There are certainly Latinos who have been activated, mobilized against this. There's no doubt about it. There's also the Enrique Terrios of the world who become the leaders of Proud Boys,
Yeah.
right? Is Nick Fuentes. These are Latino, right wing, for their own peculiar reasons. And it's going to run the gamut, but by and large, as a voting bloc, even though there is this rightward shift, it is still a majority against Donald Trump.
My last question, Mike Madrid, for you it doesn't pertain to the Latino vote. It's just a broader, straight political question. Say what you want to say, how you want to say it, or uh, misdirect and don't even address it. But I'm going to ask you right now, broadly speaking, we're 5 some months out. Who would you rather be right now, Biden or Trump? Straight
Biden,
political
Biden,
question.
Biden.
Tell me why. Tell me why.
Because the fundamentals of this race, let me talk about specifically what they are still very strongly in favor of a Democratic incumbent reelection. What you need to understand when you're looking at this race is both of these candidates have a problem with their base, but they face a very different set of reasons why. Donald Trump has had an election day problem, appeared again last night, by the way, with some of the primaries that we had,
Yeah.
but it's not showing up in polling. Election day problem, not showing up in polling. Biden has a polling problem that's not showing up on election day. Okay. None of the results of his primaries from New Hampshire to New Mexico demonstrate a problem with actual votes. So if those are the problems, as they say in the military, if the map doesn't match the terrain, you follow the terrain because that's what's real. So follow the actual real results of what voting behavior is telling you, not the instruments that are supposed to give you some guidance, and I'm not an anti-poll guy. I think they are telling us a lot. Here's
Yeah.
where I think the problem is. The problem is as these shifting coalitions are moving, we're still weighting them the same way. And
Ah,
this is important because registration hasn't changed.
ah,
This typifies, and I hate the term realignment because it's overused in our business. But if you look at the Southern Democrats, where the Southern strategy began in the 1970s, these people's voting behavior changed until they changed registration 25 years later in 1994.
oh,
Okay, that's important because a lot of these college educated white suburban women have been voting for Democrats in 4 of the last 5 elections.
yeah,
And you know what? A lot of these US born Hispanic men are still registered as Democrats. They're voting for Republicans in 4 of the last 5 elections. That means there's a realignment that is occurring, and that weighting is, I don't believe, accurately reflected in our polling instruments, which is why we're not seeing this stuff materialize on the ground. And what that does in lower turnout elections, which are primaries, midterms, and special elections, is they benefit the higher propensity, higher information, college educated voter, which are increasingly voting for Democrats. That's why we're getting these results.
Jeez.
And so these higher election contests, let me give you another perfect example, 2020. It's the highest turnout election in the history of American politics. And the incumbent Republican loses. Trump loses by a smidge. But House Republicans picked up seats.
Yeah.
Let me say that again, because this is profound, but it tells you what's changing. Republicans won in the highest turnout election in American history. It means they were getting the beneficiary of low turnout, blacker and browner votes. That is completely different than what you and I have known throughout our entire
Exactly.
career.
Yeah.
And that's why the polling weighting is not meeting what is happening on the ground. So the fundamentals, the educational shift is the way I look at the race fundamentally, the demographic shifts. The instruments we use to gauge that could not be considered accurate if you don't have a historical precedent for the models you use. That's just the way that it works. So no pollster is going to be taken credibly if they're guessing at what the turnout
Yeah.
with those demographic groups are going to be. You can't just guess. You have to look at the last three cycles at least, to gauge what the turnout model is going to look like when you predict it. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That's
And so,
cool.
and so that's why I believe the polling isn't adequately reflecting these changes and why we keep seeing these different results on election day. Now, all of this is meaningless if we have an extremely high turnout election again. I think that benefits Trump considerably. It also doesn't take into account RFK and what states he qualifies in.
Wait, Michael. Super high turnout benefits Trump.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah.
And most Democrats think the opposite.
Most Republicans think the opposite because it's a new
Yes.
phenomenon. Like I said, it's
That's
just
so cool.
happening. That's what I'm saying is we're entering a new time, but all of the data since 2016 is moving in this direction. Kristi Noem, not a fan at all, but when she says Trump broke politics, he kind of did, because what he did was he broke the separation between the cultures in this country, which are directly correlate to education levels. I mean, this is a podcast for another day, but this is
Yeah.
fascinating. The way we approach Republicans is no longer by income levels. When I was a kid doing campaigns, you could just go talk, wavering Republicans. You could bring them home on tax cuts and
Boom.
deregulation and
Yeah.
free market messages. Now, that doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. In fact, we're losing college-educated people on abortion, gun control,
Yeah.
all these cultural issues, because college education is correlate to cultural perspective, not income. And it's also one of the reasons why it's perplexing so many people with college debt, because going into all this debt for a college degree isn't translating to an economic return on investment.
This is why I love Michael Madrid. This is why I listen to him, right? Because that's what you just said is contrarian,
Yeah.
but it's true, and it's based on data.
Yeah.
Super increased voter turnout would favor Republicans. Everybody and their mother would say it would favor Democrats. My former party, the Republicans, try to limit the vote.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah.
And Democrats try to increase. They're both.
Exactly. And what that means is, in the coming years, Republicans are going to have to get better at get out the vote strategies. And it means Democrats are going to have to get better at data and analyzing voter segments, because they're not going to want to rely on turnout. They're not going to be able to.
Okay. So again, we're closing. I'm going to ask you for two quick 20-second answers.
Sorry.
No. I'm saying that you could make them 30-minute answers.
Yeah.
You would still rather be Biden right now.
Yeah. Yes.
Question number one. What though, even though you'd rather be Biden right now, what's your biggest concern for Biden?
My biggest concern is they are not limiting the leakage of Latino voters. They have to get this number down to a controllable 35%, Trump getting 35%. If he cracks 40, it's over. It will be an electoral landslide.
If Trump cracks 40 of the Latino vote, it's done, baby.
Yeah. because there's just not enough. I mean, I don't see that there's enough left white college educated voters. Those that have left have left. I mean, we can and we should push for more. And there, look, Trump is showing very significant weaknesses. I mean, he's losing 20% in these primaries to nobody, literally to nobody who's running. So
Yeah.
there is a sign that there is math there. And I'm not suggesting I wouldn't be doing the same exact thing as Biden's team is right now. But what I'm also saying is they're taking an unnecessary risk by not switching their messaging for Latino voters, because if they contained that loss and picked up the bigger Republican numbers, Biden wins in a landslide, and that's possible. But right now, I'm not seeing that, and I'm not seeing it largely because I don't think they understand the Latino community, and more often than not, it's in conflict with the other pillars of existence that they have. In other words, this is going to sound ironic, but here we go. Ready? They're afraid that if they have a more blue-collar working class agenda, it will speak to the industries that offend the college-educated white environmentalist.
Yeah.
That's where they start losing, because the coalitions are moving. So both parties are doing this delicate dance. And where do you pick up more and where do you lose more?
And then my last subset question was going to be, and maybe the answer is the same, is if you don't want Trump to win, what's your biggest fear of what would enable him to win? Like you have your biggest concern for Biden. I got it. You don't want Trump to win. What's your biggest fear that, oh my God, if this happens, he's going to win?
And probably an external shock that we're not accounting for in the fundamentals: an illness, an attack in foreign policy, a massive interference with our electoral systems, communication strategies. I mean, look, and we were very, very aware of this in 2020 and very vigilant in looking at it. And I'm grateful that we've got a Democrat president right now, because I know that they're looking for this. Our intelligence services are. But when TikTok owns 30% of the U.S. audience, why would they not fuck with us? Can I use that word on this family show?
Yes, fuck yes, you can. Totally.
Why would the Chinese not?
Yeah.
Let's stop with the will they, won't they? Why would you not do that? Let's be honest, that's why they created it. They didn't do it for money. It's for geopolitical advantage.
I'm going to say it again as I close with my guest, because I want him to take a nap, because he's probably got 6 other damn media appearances today. Mike Madrid, my favorite political strategist thinker, has a book coming out next week that I think is a transformative book, and I think it is a seminal book about just politically and demographically where we are in this country. You need to get your hands on it. It's called The Latino Century: How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. The book is out June 18th. That's next week. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, anywhere where you get a book. Learn and get your hands on this book. Follow Mike on Twitter at Madrid_Mike. My friend, thank you. I just adore you, and I learn so freaking much every time we sit down.
Likewise. I love your brain. Great questions. Appreciate everything that you're doing. Looking forward to sharing some tequila at some point in the time.
I let you down last time. We are going to share some tequila.
We'll do it in the
time. Do me a favor.
Right.
Go get some rest and then keep preaching. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, share, and follow White Flag with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been White Flag with Joe Walsh.